It. Hello, everyone. So I am Militza Mesquita. I am the Senior Advisor for Education and Emergencies with Save the Children, and I am based in Houston, Texas. And so I hope everyone's had a great holiday season and coming back and getting into things. I am just so grateful to be able to present childcare emergency preparedness. It's such a hidden topic and something we need to talk about. And so as we start this disaster season, we're going to talk about some really critical things for your early education programming. All right, so let me go back and start with who Save the Children is. So some of you may be familiar with us, some of you may not. We've been around for over 100 years in about 190 partner countries. But we do have U.S. domestic programming. Our first foot into emergency response was in 2005's Hurricane Katrina, and that response lasted years. And so when Save the Children deploys to an emergency, we are there for the long term, and that is what we are nationally known for. If we find a child care program that needs assistance, we will stay until that program is fully recovered. And in terms of recovery funding, materials, and then supports for your teachers, whether it's training, or mental health psychosocial supports. Again, we have deep-rooted background in emergencies. Under the Obama administration, we were lovingly appointed to lead the National Commission on Children in Disasters to figure out what are those gaps for children in disasters. And then in 2021, as a response to the Texas winter storm, we partnered with some organizations and developed the first of its kind childcare funding guide to access FEMA, FEMA funding, which we'll talk about a little bit in this session. We do have a separate session regarding how to access FEMA funding. So that is who Save the Children is. And then a little bit about me. I've been doing this work for a little around 7 years now. Definitely love the intersection between early education and emergencies. Started out running a childcare center, moved into social services, and then as of late found a great intersection between humanitarian work and early education, which is my true passion. So if you look at the bottom right, that is me and our first time being a vendor at NCCA in 2022. And just a little bit about the presentations we do, topics. And I think what we're most also famously known for is when we do in-person events, we love to give things away to our early ed community because everyone loves swag and stuff, and you can't have enough stuff in your childcare center. So again, this is just a little bit about me. Been doing this for quite some time now, and definitely love to hear at the end any questions you have or thoughts. Our trainings are always based on input from the early ed community, so feel free towards the end to give me your feedback or questions. All right, let's get started. So the goal and objective is just to identify risks and hazards in your childcare program. Licensing, childcare regulations requires us to have a plan. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can make that plan a little more robust. And the main thing is practicing the plan, right? Making sure that it doesn't just sit on the shelf, but we're actually intently practicing it. And again, our goal is just to help providers design and develop and implement a plan and identify those risks. I think that's the biggest thing that we forget to do is identifying risks, right? Whether we are in the Gulf and we know that we have a couple of days ahead to know about a hurricane, or whether the tornado sirens, come off and we have a couple minutes to seek shelter. What are those risks to your area? So at the end of this, we always challenge our early ed community to really look at your center and think about all the potential risks around. So why is childcare important? I know that sounds like a funny question, but it really is important, right? We all know. It's an essential normal functioning component of modern day families and communities. Almost 1/4 of children under 5 years old are in organized childcare around the US. That's huge. That's a big population of children who are seeking quality, safe care. And again, it's important to our families because what happens in disasters is we don't have access to things, right? Things close. Road workers can't get back to the work. Lawyers can't get back into the office. Doctors can't get into the hospitals because, streets are closed. Floodwaters may be up. And so it creates these devastating consequences to our families. And what happens is, as much as schools close, K through 12, childcare programs close. And so what happens to those kids in those moments when they cannot get back to their regular program, right? It affects the parents because they can't go to work. And when families can't access safe, secure childcare services, our whole region gets disrupted, right? So again, those pieces that we know were important, right? Childcare providers are the core of communities, but those regional recovery efforts start lagging. And so when we talk about childcare emergency preparedness, we really wanted to frame it from a business lens, right? Disaster impacts to your business, whether you are the owner, director, or the pre-K teacher, you still have a stake in it as an employee or as an owner in that facility. And so some of the top three things we have noticed from doing this recovery work over the years is there's a lot of financial volatility and inadequate business and administrative capacities post-disaster, right? There's not enough financial supports for childcare providers to rebuild. There's not enough information for us on, is it safe to go back into our center if we've taken in flood water? We know climate change is apparent and happening, and there's growing susceptible threats from natural disasters. Disasters are bigger, faster, stronger, more unpredictable, and so we have to figure out how do we start framing our business so that we are resilient against the growing threat from disasters. And then as these disasters keep coming and coming, more childcare providers are closing, right? We saw that in COVID, mass closures across the board, creating childcare seats that will not get filled. And so again, those isolation pieces from meaningful networks, right? You may have had a center down the road that had been your sister center for years, and now they're not there anymore. And so those isolation pieces, it really has a downward spiral in our industry. And okay, so this is a hot button slide, and so we're going to walk through it together. So in the emergency space, according to the Stafford Act, and the Stafford Act is the federal act that declares who is eligible for federal assistance after disaster. So independent for-profit childcare providers, who really represent about 85 to 90% of the service industry, right, in terms of childcare, are not eligible for FEMA funding. They're not eligible for federal funding after disaster. So what does that tell Save the Children? Well, really, that's why we're in this business, to provide financial supports, because that provides a gap that the federal government is not providing. So if you're a home provider or a nonprofit childcare entity, you will get federal funding. If you're a for-profit brick and mortar center, you are not eligible for federal funding. And that's where Save the Children comes in. And so again, that's huge, right? That represents so many childcare programs that will not get assistance after a disaster. And so that's when Save the Children really tries. We do our best to fundraise and get as many resources and funding out to these entities as possible. That way you guys are not left behind and you can start your recovery as much as everyone else. And so again, if and when childcare providers are able to open, there's a lot of debilitating debt that occurs, right? You may have had a blown out room, and now it's going to cost you $30,000. And so that's debt on top of, the already thin margins that we're operating on. Again, there's little to no technical assistance or knowledge of, should we open back up? We're early education experts. We're not mold remediation experts. Are these safe spaces to put our children back in? Really eye-opening pieces, right? Or even if we didn't take in flood water, but a power line has now fallen near our center, and they fixed it, but is it still safe to go back in? What are those pieces do we have to look for? And again, facing volatility in staff and enrollment, because what happens with disasters is people lose their homes, and then what do? They move, right? So you may have lost your infant teacher and your cook in your center, or you may have lost about 20% of your enrollment. So these have downward spirals that we really, really want to start advocating for, and encouraging childcare providers to start thinking about in terms of where you sit and how a disaster could truly impact your business. So why preparedness matters, we show this slide in almost every one of our trainings because there's so many disasters that hit the US every year that don't make media news, but it's almost $1 trillion industry. And this is the 2022 disaster season. We're waiting on the literature for the next or for the 23 season. I think maybe a few of these made national news, but this is across the board. Every national disaster that was federally declared, costing the US billions of dollars. And when I look at this map, I encourage you to think how many childcare providers are in those areas and how many were not able to recover and not come back. And so this is really challenging for our industry as these disasters become bigger and stronger and more unpredictable. So we want to think intently of like why preparedness matters to our program, right? We know that licensing or childcare regulation requires us to have our planning and practice our drills, but really programmatically, emergencies are real. They affect our programs, and we have to prioritize this. This has to be part of our everyday in our centers. Because again, being prepared can help your program minimize that risk. And that's what we really want to do as early ed folks. We know it's all about minimizing that risk, whether it's tripping and falling, choking, or again, taking in flood water to your center. We want to recover more quickly, right? If you're prepared, you have all your ducks in a row and you're like, we're opening tomorrow, your parents are going to come back. You're a trusted pillar in the community. You can get payroll back up and going because you didn't have to close for X amount of days. We want to protect our staff, right? Our staff depend on us for work. And so we want to make sure that we can get back up and going. And also we want to make sure that they're okay too. They may come to work, but they also may be staying in a shelter because their home was destroyed. So why preparedness matters, it's really holistic. We want to safeguard our business because we all know we live and die by the reputation in the Google review. We want to make sure parents remember us as, oh, they were really prepared. They handled this incident beautifully. I trust them. And lastly, why we all got into this industry is we want to protect the children, make sure they're safe and they have safe quality environments to learn. And again, preparedness, why it matters to your business is emergencies happen without much warning. We all know this. If it's a hurricane, we get a few days notice, a tornado, maybe a few minutes for a siren. But it could just all of a sudden hailstorm and we don't know what's going on. So again, that warning time is really going to play a big key factor when you talk about mitigating for risk. But again, preparedness is an ongoing process. Having a plan is a great start, right? We all know it's a requirement. So you guys are off to a great start already. Give yourself a pat on the back. But we have to communicate the plan. And so I challenge all of my directors and owners on the call. Use everyone in your center for this. Don't go at it alone. This is a holistic group activity from your cook to your infant teacher to your pre-K teacher. Everyone has a stake in this. You are not to go at this alone. And really the reputation of your program really does depend on this. So make sure that you're coming at this from your business lens, but really make it holistic that everyone in your center has a stake in this, including your children and families. And we'll get to that. This is one of my favorite slides. So why preparedness matters to children in your care. We all been told, little kid is running and trips and what is the first thing anyone says? Don't react, right? Because that child's looking at us. If we start freaking out, that kid's going to freak out. So all those little beautiful eyes are looking at us. And so if we are really prepared and strong in our preparedness and we know what to do, those kids are going to be fine, right? And we all know that they're going to walk with us in this. They're going to do the things with us. They're going to know, hey, Miss So-and-so, we're supposed to evacuate in less than 2 minutes out of this. They know what to do, where to go, and they're prepared. And again, you're on the front lines and your children are depending on you. Your families are depending on you. And this is in 2017's Hurricane Irma, I believe, in Puerto Rico. And this is a colleague of ours who does our child protection work. And I said, oh, this is such a great photo for my slide. And I said, you're just providing a little TLC to this little girl. And it looks like she's putting a Band-Aid on her. And I was like, that's such a sweet moment and picture. And she goes, I'm putting a temporary tattoo on her. And I said, this is exactly the photo I need for this slide, because again, our perception is different, right? And so making sure that we understand if we are prepared, those kids, we're going to mirror it back to us, right? They're going to know what to do. And so it's one of my favorite slides. So again, you'll see this theme throughout this training and when we talk for Q&A, but don't go at it alone. Use your staff. That's what they're there for. Get them involved in emergency preparedness. Have them walk their rooms. Have them tell you, hey, this window, it's not sealed enough. It might take in water. Your parents, have them help, right? They may know someone who is a great at something, for the fence, and use your parents as a resource too. They're there to help. They trust you with their kids at that center. Your emergency management. I wish I could see all of you right now, but how many of us know our emergency management officials in our cities and counties? Get to know them. Go to the county meetings or city meetings and say, "Hey, have you thought about including us in your emergency planning? K through 12 is in it. We are not. Let's go ahead and add our facility or our business into it." Your child care resource and referral agencies, your R&Rs, they're critical in this, and this is who Save the Children truly partners with in emergencies. That's where we like to sit our funding so they can get it out to providers because they know you guys better than we do. So make sure you're looped into your R&Rs. Licensing, they're not our foe, they're our friend. Run ideas by them. Hey, does this exceed standards? Not just meet standards, but does this exceed standards? Any first responders, I know early ed community is so great about having the firemen come out, the policemen come out, really creating that community and that relationship with those local officials is great. And then again, other child care providers, the providers down the street, they're our colleagues, they're not our competitors. We're in this together. And so again, making sure that you're coming at this from a holistic point of view and knowing who's in your area to go to for support. So identifying risks and hazards. So we do an activity, and so I'll just run through this. And so what are some activities that happen at your center every day? We have nap time, we have center time, we have meal time, outdoor play time, all the activities at your center. So what are some hazards that can be encountered at your center? And this is a great activity to do when you have professional development or your monthly staff meetings. Have your teachers walk through this exercise. So, some of those hazards could be, there could be a power outage. What are you going to do in your center? A kid could choke, trip, all sorts of things could happen, right? And what could we do to reduce or prevent some of those hazards, right? In addition to preparedness, we can do our checks to make sure that, our head count checks every 30 minutes or an hour. We can ensure that we are, feeding appropriately. We can ensure that we are tying shoes, all these things that we can do throughout the day to mitigate for these risks and hazards. And then who can help you identify and address these hazards? Everyone at your center, right? Sometimes you even get your pre-care that's like, "Miss So-and-so, I found this on the floor." And you're like, "How did that get there?" So making sure that you are using everyone at your center, that they are helping and that they are actively engaged in helping you identifying these hazards. So we like to look at what are these hazards, right? We keep talking about them. So there are four main categories of risks and hazards: natural, technological, biological, safety, and man-made. So, your natural disasters are your earthquake, fire, flood, hurricane, winter storm. Your technological is like gas leak, power outages, water, nuclear plants. And biological, we all know we just came out of the biggest one of all, COVID-19. Food contaminations, we know there's been so many food recalls in the last few years. And one that we are, newer for the early ed community, but has made national headlines over and over in the K through 12 space. And that's really the community factor, the safety, the man-made disasters, whether it's an intruder or active shooter. And we'll broach upon that a little bit down the line. Or even a cyber attack. We'll talk about cybersecurity in the early education space in a few slides. That's a newer topic for us. 20 years ago, we hadn't heard about this. And so what can we do to mitigate and making sure that we are making our center cyber secure? So when you are doing your safety planning or your emergency manual or handbook, make sure you really look at these buckets and what are you going to do to respond to these, and have you thought about these? And so how to assess for risk. This is a great exercise to do with your staff and your team. Take an example. So here we have fire. Look at the probability of it. Could that happen? Is it likely? Highly likely? What is the magnitude of it? I'm thinking it's catastrophic. Or maybe it's a small kitchen fire that you can get out fairly quickly. So it might be a limited, situation. Would you get much warning? What's the duration of it? And what's the risk level, right? Would you need to be shut down completely? Would you still remain open? So this is a great exercise to do with each of those categories, the 4 risks that we just showed you, those categories, and to get your staff and yourself as the owner or director to really intently think about, have we thought about all these pieces? What could we do? We practice our fire drills, but have we thought about, if there's a chemical spill in our area, what are we going to do? Where are we sheltering in place? How are we going to, notify parents? How long do we have to shelter in place? So start thinking about those, and I encourage everyone to, at their next team meeting, to really start to think about assessing for risk. And so this slide is the 9 national best practices, and this is put together between a couple national entities vetted through FEMA and just being in the industry for so long. This is the creme de la creme list of national best practices for your center. And so again, number 1, make a plan that meets state requirements. We all get that done. But the key word here is that is feasible for your program. You can meet standards, great. You can exceed standards, great. But if it actually doesn't work for your center and is going to do more harm than good, don't do it. Make sure that whatever you implement in your center is actually feasible and works for your programming. Because we know that it's not a one size fits all, and every program is different. You may be a home provider with 5 kids, or you may be a brick and mortar center with 300 kids. So again, making sure that it's feasible. Maintaining current health and safety information. So all your enrollment paperwork, all those shot records, making sure that's all current. We all know that we are obligated to do that, and we do such a great job at that. Develop and implement a family communication and reunification plan. We know when we give an enrollment packet to parents, it says our relocation area is this, here's key contacts. Great, but also making sure that we have up-to-date information for the parents and guardians in case we need to communicate with them in real time. Number 4, identify an emergency team and procedures. I know you guys have procedures, fire procedure, intruder drill, all that stuff, but identify an emergency team. Maybe you have a really strong toddler room teacher and they're really good at planning and leading. Lean on them, make them a part of your emergency team. Anyone that wants to be a core part of this team that is going to help plan, engage them. Assemble emergency equipment and supplies. So we all know we have first aid kits in our rooms. Wonderful. We do encourage that everyone put together an emergency backpack in every classroom if possible. If not, at least 2 robust totes or backpacks in the front office. And in a couple slides, we'll talk about what to put in those backpacks because you never know. We've been teaching this for some years now, and we've heard all stories of we sheltered in place for 12 hours, we sheltered in place for 30 minutes. You just want to be prepared for every single scenario. Make sure that your plans include children and adults of all levels of abilities. So again, if you have a child with a feeding tube, or you have a child that has sensory issues, what are you going to do in those moments? Do you have appropriate toys or distractions or, mechanisms in place to make sure that child is going to feel comfortable evacuating or sheltering in a dark room? So again, making sure your plan is really inclusive of children and adults of all abilities. Practice your plan. We know every month we're like, okay, we got to do our fire drill, but just make sure it's multifaceted. Practice that plan intently, and don't tell your teachers, hey, we're going to have a fire drill today. Have that element of surprise. Protect your program information and assets. Again, we'll talk about this. Cybersecurity for the early ed community is fairly new, but it's really crucial that if we have enrollment paperwork out on the front desk, we're protecting it. And if we have a computer that belongs to the front desk and we're doing payroll on it, or we are enrolling children on it, that computer stays with a trusted adult, the director, the owner, whoever's at the front, and doesn't make legs and wander off to an after schooler who wants to do their homework. And then again, communicating the plan and educating staff and families. Again, making sure we're just sharing out the plan. And we know we put signs up and warnings and emails and text messages to parents, and they still tell us, why I didn't see it. I didn't hear about it. But just keep doing it. We know the early ed community does such a great job at communicating to parents. And so just again, encouraging that open communication with staff and families. So your program's written plan. Look at your layout. Determine who should be involved. Consider the size of your program. Document, how many children are in your care, all that information. Gather your first response agency information. So again, making sure that you know who the emergency managers in your area are. They are separate from fire and police. And then again, everyone already has this at their centers, your site maps that have your exits, wonderful. Making sure that those are, at eye level for adults, you could see where they need to go, and that those are still up to date. So again, some steps to plan, gathering that contact information. Depending on your state and your area, you may need to obtain emergency release to transport. So in an emergency situation and you need to evacuate and you've got, 8 infants in your infant room, you may need to evacuate in real time in those car seats. And so making sure that depending on what state you live in, you have those emergency permissions. Enhancing your child staff roster by using electronic information. So your Brightville, your ProCare software, if you have it, great. If you're still paper-based, great too. We'll talk about that. Child identification badges. How do you know the children when you're evacuating? You got to do a head count, right? So what are some things you can incorporate so you have those pieces, right? Is it children wear name tags all day? Do they have wristbands? What, besides our roster, how are we going to identify these children? Permission to provide medical care. So if we are evacuating and a child trips and falls, or a child catches a fever and we are not on site, like what are those pieces? What are those permissions we have to treat? And you're going to develop a solid communication plan and a backup plan. And as we always say, a backup for the backup plan, right? We can never have too many plans. And in our emergency guide, we have a copy of this emergency wallet card. So folks know, stuff happens when you are in an emergency. And let's say, for example, you guys evacuate to the local shelter. There's tons of other people, the community is in an uproar, stuff is happening, people are just trying to sort through information. We want to make sure that those children are identifiable and we know who they are. So again, making sure that there is some sort of, I know this is Militza, this is her parents, this is the parent's phone number, this is their age, anything of that capacity, especially for the nonverbal children. And again, a reunification plan for children, so their parents and guardians know where they are. And again, inclusion is so important, making sure that our planning and our thought process on this includes staff and children of all abilities, whether it's children in wheelchairs, our infants and toddlers who may not be able to walk yet. So, making sure that our cribs and strollers are ready to go. Individuals with sensory impairments. So again, if you have to shelter in place, and turn off all the lights, if you have a child with sensory issues, that may cause, some emotions. And so what are we going to do to mitigate for that? Any child with a medical device, any food allergies, really important. Again, if we have a child that requires, refrigerated medication, how are we going to transport that? And then any other children or staff with temporary injuries. Maybe you have an after schooler who got dropped off and they're on crutches now because they hurt themselves during baseball. How are we going to make, that incorporate that into our planning? Okay. So this is our basic disaster supplies kit, and this is truly based off of what FEMA uses, any sort of high-end military situation. So we incorporated, theirs is a little more robust, but we incorporated what was feasible for, early ed community. So any medications, the recommendation at the federal level really is bottled water, baby food, non-perishable foods, a can opener, because you got to open those non-perishable foods, any emergency cash, because electricity might be out. Obviously diapers and bathroom tissue, wet wipes, tissues, blankets, a radio, because again, technology may fail us. A telephone, just in case we still can get some service. I know sometimes on, I think Apple, you can still do the emergency dial out even if you don't have service. Filters and masks, because let's say it's a tornado, there may be some gunk in the air, so we want to make sure that we are able to breathe properly and not inhaling stuff we shouldn't be. Goggles, again, just to make sure, if there's stuff in the air, that we're protecting our face. A bell or a whistle. You may have a plan that you're going to go out the front door and a tree might be blocking that front door, right? And you need to go out the back door, and there may be, high walls, high debris, high trees. So having a whistle or bullhorn so folks can hear you is really crucial as well. If you're sheltering in place, writing, paper supplies, sensory things for children, toys, disposable materials so you can make meals. Again, your first aid kits. We always say, if it's in your center, great, but a defibrillator, battery operated flashlight. We always say this, make sure your batteries are current and up to date. Wrench or pliers or scissors, because one, you may need to cut that thick plastic to get into those batteries. And also two, if you had intent to go out your front door and you now have to go out your back door, you may need to cut through a fence. So some wrench or pliers. And again, any information that identifies those children. So like a ready to go file, whether it's a printout of your enrollment, or you have, your tablet that already has that information downloaded on it. So this is our basic disaster equipment. And so we do encourage at least try to put some of this together in a backpack or in a tote in each room. But at best, really having 2 robust kits of this at the front office. So practicing your plan. Why is it important to practice your plan? So everyone knows what to do, right? Practice makes perfect, becomes a part of our life. We know what to do. We're mitigating that risk. Is there a time of day that is best for practicing plans? There's not a best time of day. It's all day, every day. And so I know it gets controversial around nap time because we want those babies to get their rest. And that's, good downtime for planning and for other things. But again, anytime during the day. Who should be included in practice drills? Everybody, including your parents, even if they're dropping off. As an example, right? It's 9:30 and you want to pull that fire alarm, that parent's going to go with you in the drill, because if it was a real fire, that parent's going to go with you. And again, benefits of having a written schedule for drills. So that's for my owners and directors to keep you accountable and to keep you on track, right? It's making sure that you are not forgetting that, hey, okay, this month it's tornado drill, next month it's fire drill. And then keeping that close to the chest so that you have that element of surprise for everyone, to ensure that they know what to do. So again, preparedness is an ongoing activity. Everyone should be involved, have that written plan. Your drills should be multi-hazard. It should not just be the intruder or the fire. It should be tornado. It should be chemical spill. What are those things you're going to do? So ensuring that you are using those 4 buckets, right? Man-made, technological, biological, and natural disasters. Again, including children, employees, everyone at your center. My home provider folks, let your neighbors know and your parents know that you're doing a drill, because we've had some providers that are home providers that have done drills, and then the neighbor sees 10 children on the front lawn and calls 911 because they think there's an incident. So again, if you're a home provider, let your neighbors or whoever is around you know that you are practicing your drill, to avoid actually really calling law enforcement. So maintaining plans, again, plans are short and long-term changes. They're a part of life. So everything changes, right? Here's the list. Family emergency contact, phone numbers, addresses, demographics, everything. Just do your best to keep up with it. It's really hard. We know parents change phone numbers all the time. Who picked up yesterday may not be able to pick up today. So just really ensuring that we're doing our best to keep all of this in mind when we look at our drills and our planning on a monthly basis. And again, regulations and standards change all the time too. So making sure we're up to date on the latest and greatest with standards. Again, updating our plan at least, each year before orientation, before we have, that August back to school time. After a real drill or emergency, that is the perfect time to sit down with your staff, debrief, and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, and then what you need to do to change your plan. So that's a great time to say, lesson learned, this didn't work, or lesson learned, this worked, let's keep at it. Again, any changes into your program size or facility, changes to evacuation sites. Your evacuation site may no longer be around, right? That business, that entity, that space may have changed or closed. Changes in state licensing requirements, or other changes or communities, right? So I'm based in Houston, Texas. And so one of the things about Houston proper is there is little to no zoning laws. So you can have a at-risk shelter next to a home, next to a childcare center, right? So we want to look at what entities are around us. Is it safe? Is there a jail to, 2 minutes down the road from us? Is this area safe for children? What are those community risk pieces? And I know those are sort of extreme examples, but really looking at who is around you. So again, scheduling recommendations, your written plan, you should really be looking at that at a minimum. These are minimum quarterly. And again, your plan checkups twice a year after your drills and emergencies, making sure that you are really going back in there and saying, this worked, this didn't work. Your staff and volunteers, so when you have new teachers coming in, boom, they get their training right then and there. And then quarterly. And then your emergency team, whoever you've identified, can meet as needed if they feel, we're really having some strong inclement weather this year. We really need to beef up our practicing or our meetings. Any program activities, really looking at that, monthly or quarterly in terms of safety and education. And your families, I know you guys do it at orientation annually, but then again, quarterly, making sure if it's a, quarterly newsletter or quarterly practice, that you want to let them know, making sure they get that information. So again, emergencies and the impact to your business, you'll see this theme again. Again, childcare is particularly vulnerable to disruptions caused by natural disasters. And that is in large part due to we're not eligible for federal funding if we're a for-profit provider. So that sort of just tells us our road to recovery, we're a few steps behind. And again, what we see here is a lot of us are operating on slim profit margins, right? So a lot of us are like, we can't take on a $20,000 bill right now to rebuild X, Y, and Z. And so again, this is why we teach about preparedness. We teach about really looking at your facility, your building, embedding emergency preparedness into your business plan. That's where we want to start, right? Because this will affect our bottom line if we have to go through insurance. Insurance doesn't always cover everything, right? We may need $20,000 of work and insurance cuts us a check for $12,000. What are we going to do with that extra, gap? How are we going to fund that? So really looking at emergencies as how it affects your bottom line in your business. All right, so something newer that I promised we'd touch on is protecting program information assets in our communication. So again, protecting your program data and finances is really crucial. The latest and greatest in cybersecurity and cyber attacks, we're all susceptible to it. And we know sometimes that we are not the best in the early ed industry in cybersecurity because that's not what we're experts in, right? So just some tips on making sure that, sensitive information is not left out, right? We know now in the cyber world that you don't necessarily need someone's social anymore to have identity theft or fraud. So when you're enrolling kids, you have access to names, addresses, phone numbers. That's enough information to do some harm. So we want to make sure that if you are enrolling someone and your teacher calls for an incident or a bathroom break, that you either take that paperwork, put it away, or you take it with you on your person. We don't leave it lying out so everyone can see so-and-so is being enrolled and lives at this address. And again, that information should not be removed from the premises. So if you are going through files to ensure compliance, that should not be, I took it home to my personal home and I'm going to do it after dinner. That needs to be done on site, because what happens if you are on your way home, God forbid a car accident happens, and then all your papers go flying everywhere? Okay, so we want to make sure that that paperwork or that tablet where you have the enrollment on stays at the center. And again, if you have paper copies, wonderful. Hard copying information must be double locked. So we want to see, a box, a tackle box in a cabinet or a cabinet behind a locked door. So that's just Health and Human Services standards for their files. So making sure that we are double locking files when we're not using them. And again, Storing digital copies is great. If you've made the digital leap, congrats. Making sure we have those strong passwords on our computers and that we're not letting anyone use these computers for any personal business. And again, just some cyber protection, making sure we have those real-time monitoring pieces, like Norton 360. Again, strong passwords. If your center is ABC123, that's probably not the best password. Delete any unnecessary student data. If you know your children are 13 and 14 years old and have graduated from your center, you can go ahead and delete that information, make some space on the cloud. Something else that we are encouraging all ECE providers to do is, if somehow someone is to infiltrate your computer, let's say there is a cyber attack, what is your response plan? What are you going to inform your parents of? So we encourage everyone in their enrollment packet to just put a little sentence in there saying, we double lock our information, your child's information is safe with us, or we have, secure password and real-time monitoring for our computers, to ensure that your child's information is held private with us. So just put something in there just to mitigate for one risk, mitigate from lawsuit. And that way your parents know that you guys do take this, of the utmost security and serious, and that you guys are protecting that information. Okay, a few more minutes. And so some cyber protection recommendations. Again, on the do's side, we have making sure those safety modes are on, those, filter anything in terms of, what we should be doing correctly is on. So making sure that we are, again, everything is password protected of the utmost capability. Doing routine check, making sure that just because you put the password on there one time doesn't mean it's going to stay on there, right? So making sure that we are checking to make sure that these appropriate passwords are being used correctly. Okay. And again, sometimes that data sharing, sometimes that can go one way or another. So again, making sure that we're not location sharing on those computers that have really sensitive information, especially when parents are enrolled in certain federal programs. Sometimes that is attached to a social. So making sure that we are protecting that. And again, if you take your tablet offsite for a field trip, making sure when it comes back, we're doing the check to make sure the password still works. And if you had your enrollment paper for your checks to do your head count, and you were offsite at the zoo for the day, and you come back, that either gets shredded, documented somewhere, or filed back, so that you had 20 kids go out, you have 20 kids come in, but that paper just doesn't just lay wherever with children's names on it. Some don'ts. Again, social media, we know that's how we advertise. Wonderful. But again, social media as a business, great. Social media, personal sharing with parents, we recommend you do not do. Again, if you have ABC123 is your Facebook account, that's how you're going to communicate with your parents, not your personal account. Seen too much confusion and convolution in that. And so we just want to make sure that we are really holding ourselves to the professional standard and having those professional relationships. And so again, just really holding that line, that solid line of what's appropriate in social media and what's not appropriate. And for our staff too, right? Our teachers know that they are not to communicate with their parents via Facebook, Snapchat, fill in the blank. That if there is an issue or concern there, to go through the proper channel per your center's policies. So again, to wrap up, this training, we've developed this 1 hour version, and then we also have a 2 hour version where we go through scenarios and do tactical role playing with a team. And so if we ever get to the opportunity to do this in person, we would love to do that for everyone. So again, creating your emergency team to help you plan and write each section of your emergency plan is really key and crucial in step 1. Step 2 is really to remember to involve parents, licensing, community members, your emergency managers in your area to help, right? They have a stake in this as well. Don't go at this alone. Working with your community to identify gaps in areas in your plans and collaboration, strengthening your emergency planning, right? Your facility planning, really working with everyone to identify those gaps is going to be critical. So I think we are at questions portion. And if anyone has any questions, this is my email that you can email me at with any questions. I will answer in real time. If you have any thoughts or need more resources, this is a great email, emergencies@safechildren.org. Myself and my colleague are happy to answer any questions on that. And then real quick, our emergency manual is available for everyone, including how to access funding after a disaster. So if you take about 30 seconds and quickly scan this, you'll have access to these QR codes with those manuals for yourself and for your center.
Thank you so, so much, Militza. We really appreciate you taking the time to present this incredibly critical information to us today. I know that we haven't had a lot of questions in the chat, but if anyone has anything that they'd like to bring up, feel free to either raise your hand or put it in the chat so we can get Militza to touch base on that right now. But if not, again, she has put in the email. I put it in the chat. I can put that there again, just so everyone has it, and I'll include it in the follow-up that goes out after today's session, along with the manual. We'll be including that with today's follow-up. So I'll leave the floor open for a few minutes. If no one has any questions, if Cindy, our director, she'd like to go ahead and chime in, that would be great.
Hi, Militza. It's you did such a great job of as we knew you would, of helping, our members and even myself understand all the variables surrounding emergency preparedness. We're just really thrilled to have a partner that could not only do this for us, but to answer questions should we have any, moving forward.
Sure.
I live in Florida, so I'm well prepared. I mean, we've had a lot of emergencies in the last couple of years. I also lived in Oklahoma when they were having a lot of issues with tornadoes, and one did occur during the business day and ultimately actually destroyed some childcare centers, but there was no loss of life due to the preparedness. So I know how important it is. So thank you so much. And I encourage everybody here to keep Militza and the organization that she works with in mind for future reference.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to go ahead and realign things real quick so we can do some quick announcements. So hopefully everyone can see that January is going to be a double feature month for us for our webinar series. So if you really enjoyed all the valuable information that you learned here today, please come back and join us again on the 24th. We have one of our partners, One Place Childcare, who will be speaking on compliance data essentials. So that's very important. I'm sure many of you know, if you're on that, that can get a little bit hectic and overwhelming. So please join us then to have Lynn explain that to you and how One Place could possibly be useful to you in those endeavors. I'm going to go ahead and leave this up here as well. If you want to get connected with One Place ahead of time, you can go ahead and scan that. And then if you have any questions, email us, whether it's about advocacy, general inquiries, our membership, please go ahead. Folks who are here today, you will get the certificate for attending today's session, as well as the recording and the goodies that Militza has provided. Those will be attached when I send that out later today. And I believe that might be it. I think if there's anything I'm missing, follow us on social. That's always nice. We try to keep as up to date as possible. And if any of you who are on right now are also going to be attendees at our upcoming conference in April, that is where a lot of the information is going to be. So if you have already purchased your ticket, we appreciate you, and we're really excited to meet you in Austin. And if not, we are working on possibly expanding our reach a little bit. So go on our website and go ahead and join that wait list. if you are interested in possibly being able to attain a spot if we have the space. We are really excited. It is kind of an NCCA renaissance of sorts, so we're really, really looking forward to it. But other than that, I know it says see you next month, but technically we'll see you in a week or 2 weeks. So if you're able to join us, please do. But other than that, I think we're good to go. So thank you so much for joining us today.